Hi students, welcome back to GDC classes. So this is another session of the RRB Tejas series, and in this session we will discuss MCQs on three topics of human anatomy and physiology. So one is the endocrine system, respiratory system and the urinary system. So let us start. So first question, the tiny air sacs present in human lungs is called. So there are certain sac-like structures present within the lungs, and what these structures are called: alveoli, bronchus, bronchioles, all of the above. So the answer is alveoli. Our respiratory system, it starts at the nose. So external nostrils, the air from the external nostrils, it enters into the nasal cavity. Then comes the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles. The bronchioles again divide into the primary, secondary, terminal bronchioles. The terminal bronchioles, at the end of the terminal bronchioles, these sac-like structures called alveoli are present within the lungs. And the main or the primary function of the alveoli, it is the exchange of gases. Okay. And the next question, which of the following is the function of the respiratory system? So the options are: provides for gas exchange, helps regulate the blood pH, filters the inspired air, all of the above. So the answer is all of the above. The respiratory system, it performs gas exchange. So what is gas exchange? Just now I have told you that in alveoli gaseous exchange will happen. So when we inhale air, we inhale the oxygen, right? So oxygen is required for production of energy, and the energy is utilized for the different life processes that are happening in the body. So oxygen from the alveoli, it will enter into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream it will be entering into the tissues, where the oxygen will be utilized for the production of energy. And as a result, or in return, carbon dioxide will be produced by the tissues, and this carbon dioxide from the tissues, it will enter into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream into the alveoli, and from the alveoli to the outside of the body. So the exchange of oxygen and the carbon dioxide between the alveoli, or between the lungs and the tissues or the blood circulation, it is known as gaseous exchange. And the other function is that it will help to regulate the blood's pH. So how it will regulate the pH of the blood? So when the carbon dioxide concentration in the body, the carbon dioxide concentration in the blood, it will influence the pH levels. So this carbon dioxide, it will react with water to form carbonic acid, and the carbonic acid will dissociate to form the hydrogen ions and the bicarbonate ions. And these ions, they will influence the blood pH. If the bicarbonate ions concentration is more in the blood, then the blood becomes alkaline, and if the hydrogen ions concentration is more in the blood, then the blood becomes acidic. So this is how the blood pH is regulated. And then filters a inspired air. So when we inspire air, along with the oxygen, we may also inspire some dust particles, some germs and bacteria. And the respiratory tracts, that is the trachea, the pharynx and the bronchi, inside they have a mucosal lining which has mucus. So mucus is a very sticky substance, and when the air passes through these respiratory tracts, the dust particles, the germs, the pathogens, they will stick to the mucus, and only the clean air will be passed into the lungs. And next question, the maximum volume of air contained in the lungs by a full forced inhalation is called. So when we inhale air with the full force, or with applying some energy, so what is that phenomena called, or that volume called? Tidal volume, vital capacity, ventilation rate, or total lung capacity? So it is the total lung capacity. So the maximum volume of air that we can inspire by applying some energy some force, it is the total lung capacity, and it is about 500 to 600 ml. So our total lung capacity is 5000 to 6000 ml. So these are some other volumes of the lungs. Let us also discuss that. The inspiratory reserve volume, it is the maximum volume of air that can be inhaled after a normal inspiration. So when we inspire normally, so without applying any extra force or extra energy, when we inhale normally some air, after that normal inhalation, what is the amount of air that we can inhale with some apply of energy? So after normal inhalation, what is the maximum air that we can inhale with applying some energy? That is the inspiratory reserve volume, and it is about 2500 to 3500 ml in human beings. And coming to expiratory reserve volume, it is the maximum volume of air that can be exhaled after normal expiration. So when we expire the air normally, exhale the air normally, after that, what is the volume of air that we can exhale with some energy, with some force? And it is about 1000 to 1500 ml. So always remember one thing: inspiration is a active process. That means if we have to inspire air, we have to apply some more energy, whereas expiration, it is not, it is not an active process. We don't need that much energy which we required for inspiration. So that's why the inspiratory reserve volume is always higher than the expiratory reserve volume. So we can inspire more air by applying energy than the air that we expire. Now coming to the vital capacity, it is the maximum volume of air that can be exhaled after a maximum inspiration. So after a maximum inspiration, what is the amount of air that we can exhale? So it is about 4000 ml, and the vital capacity is the sum of inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and the expiratory reserve volume. Now coming to the total lung capacity, it is the sum of the residual volume, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and the inspiratory reserve volume. Tidal volume in human beings is, so what is the value of the tidal volume? 1000 ml, 1500 ml, 500 ml, 4.5 ml. So what is the answer? It is 500 ml. The volume of air inspired or expired with every normal breath without any effort. So without applying any extra force or extra energy, what is the volume of air that we inspire and expire during normal breathing? So that is the tidal volume, which is 500 ml. Now the vital capacity of the lungs is the sum of. So among these, which is the correct one? So the first one, the tidal volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume and the expiratory reserve volume. Next question. Which respiratory organ is not a part of the lower respiratory system? So our respiratory system, it is divided into two: the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. And among these options, which is not a part of the lower respiratory system or the lower respiratory tract? The answer is pharynx. So the nose, the nasal cavity, and the nasal cavity, they constitute the upper respiratory tract, whereas these things, the larynx, the windpipe, lungs, bronchi, bronchioles, and the alveoli, they will constitute the lower respiratory tract. So from the nose to the pharynx, it constitutes the upper respiratory tract, and from the larynx, the trachea, the bronchioles, the alveoli, and the lungs, they constitute the lower respiratory tract. And next question. The external nose have two openings called. So the external openings, if you observe, what are those called? Nostrils, concave nasal cavity, or alar. So it is known as nostrils. These are the external nostrils. So here the external nostrils will be present. And to the other side of the nasal cavity, on the inside, there will be two other openings which open into the pharynx. Okay, the external openings are known as nostrils. On the other side of the nasal cavity, on the inside, the two openings which open into the pharynx, those are known as internal nares. Okay, they open into the pharynx. The air from the nasal cavity enters into the pharynx through the internal nares. And alar means it is a cartilage which is present at the tip of the nose. So here, this is the alar cartilage. And nasal cavity, it is a space. Concave means these are passages. Okay, these are passages which are present within the nasal cavity. And the next question, the gaseous exchange in the alveoli is a type of. So in our body, the fluids, ions, and also the gases, they will be transported or exchanged by different mechanisms like the active transport, passive transport, simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, etc. And particularly the exchange of gases between the alveoli, that is between the lungs and the bloodstream. So by what mechanism the gases are exchanged? The options are simple diffusion, osmosis, active transport, and passive transport. So what is the answer? It is the simple diffusion. So simple diffusion, in what happens in simple diffusion? The gases will travel based on their concentrations. So gases will always travel from a area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So when we inspire air, the concentration of oxygen within the alveoli will be more when compared to the concentration of air within the bloodstream. So that's why the oxygen will travel from the alveoli to the bloodstream. And also when the oxygen is utilized by the tissues will produce carbon dioxide which will enter the bloodstream. So the concentration of carbon dioxide within the bloodstream will be more. So that's why the carbon dioxide will enter into the alveoli where the concentration of oxygen is more and the concentration of carbon dioxide is less. So the gases will travel from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. This mechanism is known as simple diffusion. Next question. A deficiency of oxygen at the tissue level is called. So, when the tissues are not getting a proper oxygen supply, what is that condition known as? Hypoxia, hypercapnia, hyperventilation, and hypertension. So, the answer is hypoxia. So, if the tissues then they require oxygen, right? The tissues will utilize the oxygen to produce energy to perform different functions. If the oxygen is not supplied to the tissues in enough amounts, that condition is known as hypoxia, and it is characterized by different symptoms like restlessness, headache, confusion, rapid heartbeat which is known as tachycardia, rapid breathing which is tachypnea, anxiety, difficulty in breathing, and also these conditions when the oxygen is not uh, properly supplied in enough amounts to the tissues, then the heart will try to pump more blood. Okay, its rate will increase, in an effort to supply all the parts of the body with blood and also with oxygen. And also in order to get more oxygen, the person will try to breathe more times, more rapidly. And severe symptoms of hypoxia include slow heart rate, extreme restlessness, and also the skin will turn blue. So if a proper enough amounts are not supplied to the skin cells, then the cells they will start to turn blue. And hypercapnia means it is above normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So if the carbon dioxide levels are increased more than normal, then it is known as hypercapnia. Rapid breathing, it is known as hyperventilation, and the total volume of air inhaled and exhaled each minute, that is known as minute ventilation. And next question, the volume of air in one breath is called. Expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, vestibule, and minute ventilation. It is tidal volume. So the volume of air that we inhale in one breath, that means during normal expiration and inhalation without any application of energy or force, what is the volume of air that we inhale and exhale during a normal breath? That is the tidal volume. And what is the capacity of the tidal volume? It is 500 ml. And next, which of the following is not the nitrogenous waste product eliminated by excretion? So among the following, which is the product that is not excreted as an excretory product, which is not eliminated as an excretory product? So the answer is creatinine. So let us know the explanation. Ammonia, urea, and uric acids. These are the waste products or the excretory products that are released by different organisms. So the ammonia, it is eliminated as a waste product by the fishes, and this ammonia, it is a highly toxic substance, and it requires more water to be eliminated out of the body. And as you know, the fishes, they are aquatic animals. Okay, they live in aquatic environments, so as they are in contact with water always, they it is not difficult for them to eliminate ammonia as there is more availability of water. And urea, it is excreted by the mammals, like that means our humans. Urea requires less energy and also it is less toxic when compared to ammonia and uric acid. It requires less water to be released outside of the body. In uric acid, it is released by birds. Uric acid is somewhat less toxic and also it requires less energy and water to be released outside of the body, but it is more toxic than urea. So the toxicity order is ammonia is more toxic, then the uric acid, then the urea. And coming to creatinine, creatinine, it is not a excretory product. The proteins they will be converted into amino acids, and the amino acids will be converted into a product called creatinine in the liver. And this creatinine, it is used as a source of energy by the muscles to work. And the muscles, they use this creatinine and they produce, sorry, they use creatine. Okay, they use creatine and they produce creatinine as a waste product, as a waste product, which is then converted into urea and then released to the outside of the body. And next question: the trigone is an area located within the urethra, urinary bladder, renal pelvis, and kidneys. So urethra, it is a tube into which the urine is released from the urinary bladder, and urinary bladder is a structure which stores the urine. Renal pelvis, it is a part of the kidney, and as you know, kidney is an organ. So which is the area that is located in the sorry, which is the trigone is an area located within urinary bladder. So here you can see this triangular shaped area. It is known as the trigone. So it has two openings from the two ureters. So these are the ureters here. They will carry the urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. These ureters, and the two openings of the ureters are present at the trigone area of the urinary bladder. So the urine will empty into the urinary bladder through these openings present at the trigone area. And another important thing is that the urinary bladder has a muscle called detrusor muscle, which will contract for the urine to be eliminated. So when there is a need for the urine to be eliminated out of the body, the detrusor muscle, which is present within the wall of the urinary bladder, it will contract. And next question: which of the following structure encloses the glomerulus? So these are the structures: Bowman's capsule, medullary pyramids, cortex, and the renal capsule. So among these, within which the glomerulus is present? So the answer is Bowman's capsule. So this is the glomerulus, the Bowman's capsule. These are the structures of the nephron, and nephrons are the functional units of the kidney. So this blood capillary, this network of blood capillary, it is known as the glomerulus, and this glomerulus is present within the Bowman's capsule. It is enclosed by the Bowman's capsule. So this cup-like structure, this is known as the Bowman's capsule. The glomerulus along with the Bowman's capsule is known as the Malpighian body. So both the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule together, they are called as the Malpighian body. And next question, what is reabsorption? So among these options, which is called the reabsorption? So absorption of filtrate by the renal tubules, secretion of nutrients into the filtrate, absorption of retentate by the renal tubules, or absorption of the proteins and carbohydrates only. So what is the answer? It is the absorption of the filtrate by the renal tubules. So the nephron, it has the glomerulus. So here the glomerulus, the blood capillary network, that is the glomerulus, and then the Bowman's capsule. So the blood, when it travels, okay, from the renal artery, it will enter into the glomerulus, that is into the nephron, and from the glomerulus, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, platelets, they will not enter into the Bowman's capsule or the corpuscular. Here some space will be present. Okay, here this space, that is the corpuscular space. Okay, within this space, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets, they will not enter because they are in large size, and only substances like the glucose, amino acids, different ions, water, only they will enter into the Bowman's capsule. Okay, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, platelets, and also the plasma proteins, they will not enter into the Bowman's capsule. And from the Bowman's capsule, they will enter into the proximal convoluted tubule, then to the loop of Henle, then to the distal convoluted tubule, and at last the collecting tube. So this is the structure of the nephron. So reabsorption means it is a phenomenon by which the substances present within the filtrate. So filtrate means it is a fluid present within the renal tubules, and the reabsorption means it is a absorption of ions or any other substance from the filtrate into the blood circulation. So when glucose enters from the filtrate within the tubule into the blood circulation, that phenomena is known as reabsorption. And the reabsorption can occur either passively or actively. That means passively means the ions or the substances will simply enter into the blood circulation without any energy. But if it is transported actively, then it means some transporters are involved, some energy is involved to transport those substances into the blood. So about 65% of the filtrate is reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule. So about 65% of the reabsorption will take place in the proximal convoluted tubule. And next question, what is glycosuria? Low amount of sugar in the urine, average amount of sugar in the urine, low amount of fat in the urine, or high amount of sugar in the urine? So the answer is high amount of sugar. So the glucose, the amino acids, the urea, uric acid, different ions, they are absorbed from the nephron tubules into the blood circulation as per the requirements of the body. And if there is any malfunctioning in the kidney is not functioning properly, the glucose will not be absorbed properly into the blood circulation, and as a result all the glucose will be eliminated outside of the body through the urine. So that condition, if more amounts of glucose or sugars are present within the urine because of improper reabsorption, then that condition is known as glycosuria. Next question. Which of the following is the term given to the condition of RBCs in urine? So, if red blood cells are present in the urine, what that particular condition is called? Hematuria, pyuria, hemoglobinuria, or proteinuria? So, among these, what is the answer? So, it is hematuria. So, if red blood cells are present in the urine, then it is known as hematuria. So generally the red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and other plasma protein, they will not be present in the urine. Okay, only the ions, some ions, urea, some waste products, only they will be present in the urea as they have to be eliminated out of the body. And if the cells like the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are present in the urine, then it indicates some abnormality in the body or in the functioning of the kidney. If white blood cells are present in the blood, then that condition is known as pyuria. If hemoglobin is present, then it is known as hemoglobinuria. And if proteins are present, then it is known as proteinuria. And next question, the functional unit of the kidneys is called glomerulus, nephron, corpuscle, or calyx. So what is the answer here? It is a nephron. So nephrons, a large number of nephrons are present within both the kidneys, and that's why these nephrons, these are the organs which form the urine, which will filter the blood, which will help in the reabsorption of the useful substances to the body. So that's why the nephrons are known as the functional units of the kidney. So here are the different parts: the glomerulus, which is a blood capillary network. Then comes the double walled structure, cup-like structure, Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, the descending loop and the ascending loop, distal convoluted tubule, and then the collecting duct. So adjacent to the nephron tubules, there is a network of blood capillary, which is known as the vasa recta. So the glucose or any other substance, or you can say the water also, from the tubules they will enter into the adjacent blood capillaries, that is the vasa recta. And if there is any thing that is not required by the body, then it will be secreted into the tubules, and then it will be eliminated out of the body. The unrequired substances are secreted into the tubules, whereas the required substances are absorbed into the bloodstream. And next question, which factor is most important in pushing the urine from ureter towards the bladder? So from the urine from the kidney, it will enter the ureter, from the ureter to the urinary bladder, and from the urinary bladder to the urethra. So what is the factor that influences the pushing of urine from the ureter into the urinary bladder? Gravity, peristaltic contraction, hydrostatic pressure, or the peristaltic relaxation? So the factor is peristaltic contraction. The ureter transports the urine from kidney to the urinary bladder. The ureter wall has a smooth muscle. Okay, it is a muscular wall, the ureter. So the contraction, the peristaltic contraction of the muscular wall of the ureter will help in pushing down the urine into the urinary bladder. But also to some extent the hydrostatic pressure and also the gravity will help in pushing the urine, but the primary factor is the peristaltic contraction of the muscular wall of the ureter. And next question, the fluid that enters the glomerulus is serum, blood, urine, or lymph? So the option is blood. So blood, right? Blood will enter the glomerulus, and from the blood only some substances will enter into the Bowman's capsule, except the red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and the plasma proteins. Serum means it is a straw colored fluid which doesn't have any clotting factors. It is just a clear fluid. Urine, as you know, it is formed in the kidney by the nephron tubules, and lymph is a white fluid, viscous fluid present within the lymphatic vessels. Next question, what volume of glomerular filtrate do adults make every day? So glomerular filtrate means it is the amount of so the blood passes through the glomerular capsule, and some fluid will enter into the Bowman's, Bowman's capsule. So what is the amount of fluid that is entering into the the nephron, the Bowman's capsule? What is the amount of fluid that is being filtered? So the options are 1 to 5 liters, 80 liters, 130 liters, or 180 liters. So it is asking per day. And what is the number? 180 liters of fluid. Sorry. So glomerular filtrate means it is a fluid that is filtered by the glomeruli and it enters the capsular space. So the fluid that is being filtered in the glomeruli and entering into the capsular space, that fluid is known as glomerular filtrate. And per day up to 180 liters of fluid is being filtered by the glomerulus. And next question, which of the following is a heterocrine gland? So heterocrine gland, it is a gland which can perform both exocrine functions and endocrine functions. And among these, which is known as a heterocrine gland? Sweat glands, salivary glands, pineal glands, and pancreas. So the answer is pancreas. Pancreas, they can perform both exocrine function and endocrine function. So that is why it is a heterocrine gland. So how it is possible? The exocrine part of the pancreas have acinar cells which secrete different digestive enzymes and digestive juices that will be released into the digestive tract. Then the endocrine part of the pancreas have islets of Langerhans which constitute the alpha cells and beta cells that release the insulin and glucagon hormone. So the pancreas can perform both the exocrine function and the endocrine function. So sweat glands, as you know, it is an exocrine gland which will secrete the sweat. Salivary glands, those are also an example of the exocrine glands which secretes saliva into the mouth. And coming to the pineal gland, it is an endocrine gland which secretes a hormone called melatonin. What is the function of prolactin? So prolactin, it is a hormone that is released by the anterior pituitary gland. And what is the function of this prolactin? Formation of milk, decreases the activity of FSH, decreases the activity of LH, or increases the contractions during the childbirth. So the answer is formation of milk. Prolactin is released by anterior pituitary, and its functions are, it regulates the growth of the mammary gland. So within the mammary glands are the ones which will produce the milk, right? So they regulate the growth of the mammary gland, they influence the formation of the milk within the mammary gland, and also another function is it helps in maintaining the corpus luteum. So this is about the prolactin. Next question, which of the following hormones is responsible for ovulation? Ovulation means it is the release of the egg or the oocyte from by the rupturing of the mature Graafian follicle into the fallopian tube. So the release of oocyte into the fallopian tube by the mature Graafian follicle, that is known as ovulation. And which hormone is responsible for this phenomena? The luteinizing hormone, follicle hormone, progesterone hormone, or testosterone hormone. So the answer is luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone, it is a hormone which is produced by the anterior pituitary. It will influence the ovulation process. So this is a mature Graafian follicle. Okay, this is a mature Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle gets ruptured, and as a result, the oocyte will be released into the fallopian tube. So this is a oocyte. And next question, of all the hormones, okay, all of the following are hormones of the pituitary, anterior pituitary, except. So among these options, which hormone is not the one released by the anterior pituitary? Human growth hormone, follicle hormone, oxytocin, and thyroid stimulating hormone. So the answer is oxytocin. Oxytocin along with the antidiuretic hormone, that is the vasopressin, they are released by the posterior pituitary gland. Whereas the growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, prolactin, and the melanocyte stimulating hormone, these are released by the anterior pituitary, and only two hormones are released by the posterior pituitary. And next question, testosterone is secreted by. So testosterone is a male sex hormone, and it is secreted by what type of cells? Sertoli cells, Leydig cells, thyroid, or the spermatogenic cells? The answer is Leydig cells. So as you know, the testes, they have the seminiferous tubules. Okay, within the seminiferous tubules, Sertoli cells are present, which will help in the formation of sperms. That is, they influence the spermatogenesis process. Whereas outside the seminiferous tubules, there are these cells called Leydig cells, which will produce a hormone called testosterone. And next, which of the following is responsible for sleep cycle movements? So which hormone will influence our sleep wake cycle? Melatonin, dopamine, serotonin, or adrenaline? So the answer is melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone which is released by the pineal gland present in the brain. When the melatonin hormone is released, it will cause a person to sleep. It will induce sleep in a person. Next question. Which part of the human brain is concerned with the regulation of body temperature? So among these organs, these parts, these are the parts of the brain. Among these, which will influence the regulation of body temperature? That is thermoregulation. The hypothalamus, medulla oblongata, cerebellum, or cerebrum. The answer is hypothalamus. So remember, hypothalamus, it influences, it acts as a link. So it is located in the forebrain of the, so okay, it is located in the forebrain. It regulates body temperature, and also it will regulate the growth and sexual behavior of a person. It serves as a vital link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. So what is the meaning here? So when the body temperature is changed, like if it becomes hot or if it becomes cold, it will be sensed by the hypothalamus. The sensory nerves, they will send the information to the hypothalamus. And hypothalamus, what it will do in turn, it will cause some actions. It will stimulate certain uh, organs in our body to do certain functions. So for example, if the temperature of the body is very high, the hypothalamus, it will cause the sweat glands to release more sweat, so that the sweat can cool off the body. It can cool off the body temperature. And also it will cause the blood vessels present within, sorry, below the skin to dilate, so that the heat can be radiated off from the body and the body can somewhat cool down. For example, if the body temperature is very cold, the hypothalamus, it will cause the muscles to contract, to shiver, so that some heat will be generated. And also it will cause the blood vessels to constrict, so that the heat will not be radiated out of the body and the heat can be conserved within the body. So this is how the hypothalamus, it will act as a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. And next, pituitary gland is known as the master endocrine gland, but it is under the control of. So pituitary glands actions are controlled by a particular organ. What is that? The pineal gland, adrenal gland, hypothalamus, or the thyroid gland. So the answer is hypothalamus. So the pituitary gland, it is of two types, the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. The hormones released by these two pituitary glands, two parts of the pituitary gland, is influenced by the hypothalamus. So for example, the hypothalamus will release the growth hormone releasing hormone. If only if the hypothalamus releases the growth hormone releasing hormone, then only the pituitary gland can release the growth hormone. So if the hypothalamus is not releasing the growth hormone releasing hormone, the pituitary will not be able to release the growth hormone. So the hypothalamus will tell the pituitary gland what to release and when to release. So it will control the pituitary gland. And which gland controls the basal metabolic rate? So options are pancreas, parathyroid gland, testes, or thyroid. So the answer is thyroid gland. So what is the basal metabolic rate? It is a number of calories that your body burns in order to perform life sustaining functions. So in order to perform the life processes like the respiration, energy generation, excretion, digestion, so it requires energy. And for that energy to be produced, we have to burn some calories. We have to burn some, the stored energy, right? That is known as the basal metabolic rate. And which organ is responsible for that? It is the thyroid gland. It will control the basal metabolic rate. And here the pancreas, as you know, they will form the digestive enzymes and also hormones like insulin and glucagon. Parathyroid gland, it will influences the calcium levels within the blood. So they are also present in the neck region behind, on the backside. So they will release a hormone called calcitonin and a parathyroid hormone, which will influence the calcium levels in the blood. And testes, you all know, within which the sperms are produced, and also testosterone hormone is released. Next question. The endocrine gland responsible for the body's circadian rhythm is the, so circadian rhythms are nothing but it is a natural biological clock of the body. Okay, it will for example, if a person will sleep only at a certain time, so when a time, for example, it is 10 o'clock, then the person will feel like sleeping. So it is because of the biological clock within the body. So what is the gland that influences these circadian rhythms in the body? Thymus gland, pineal gland, parathyroid gland, or the pituitary gland? So the answer is pineal gland. So as you know, the pineal gland, it is a part of the brain, and it releases a hormone called melatonin. When this melatonin hormone is released into the blood, it will always induce the person to sleep. And if it is not released, then the person will remain wakeful. So melatonin will influence the sleep wake cycle, which is a circadian rhythm. So these are all the questions that we will be discussing in this section, and we will try to discuss some more questions of different other topics in the next session. Thank you.